I've always been careful about locking my door. Not paranoid, just consistent. It's something I do without thinking, the same way some people check the stove or turn off the lights before bed. That night was no different. I remember locking it clearly. I remember the sound it made, the weight of the handle in my hand, the quick pull afterward just to be sure. I live alone in a small apartment on the second floor of an older building. Nothing fancy. Thin walls, narrow hallway, cheap doors that look solid but feel hollow when you knock on them. I've been there for almost 3 years, long enough to know every normal sound the place makes at night. Pipes expanding, someone walking upstairs, the distant hum of traffic that never really stops. That night I went to bed around midnight. I'd worked late, eaten something quick, and barely had the energy to scroll on my phone before falling asleep. I don't remember dreaming. I don't remember waking up suddenly either. It was more like drifting back into awareness slowly, the way you do when something feels slightly off but you can't say why. The first thing I noticed was the light. A thin strip of it, cutting across the ceiling above my bed. At first, my half-asleep brain didn't register what it meant. I thought maybe a car had passed outside or someone across the street had turned on a porch light. But the angle was wrong. Too low, too steady. It took a few seconds for it to click. The light was coming from the hallway. I stared at it, still lying on my back, listening. The apartment was quiet. No footsteps, no voices. Just that familiar hum of electricity and my own breathing, suddenly louder than it should have been. I always turn the hallway light off before bed. Always. The switch is right next to the bedroom door. I can reach it without even looking. I knew I hadn't left it on. My first thought was simple. I must have forgotten. That happens sometimes, even with routines. I told myself that as I rolled onto my side and looked directly at the bedroom door. It was closed. That's when I felt the first real wave of discomfort. The light wasn't coming from under my bedroom door. It was coming from the front door at the end of the hallway. The light was spilling down the corridor and bleeding into my room through the narrow gap between the doorframe and the wall, which meant the hallway light was on. And my bedroom door was open, not wide open, just enough. I stayed still for a long time after that, trying to replay the night in my head. Had I gotten up and left the door like that? Had I turned the hallway light on for some reason and not remembered? I went over the routine again and again, looking for a mistake I could latch onto. Eventually, I convinced myself it was nothing. Sleep does weird things to memory. Everyone knows that. I got up, walked to the door, and pulled it fully open. The hallway light was on, just like I'd thought. The front door was closed, locked. I checked it twice. The lock was exactly how I'd left it. I turned the hallway light off and stood there for a moment, listening again. Nothing. I went back to bed and fell asleep almost immediately, like my body had been waiting for permission. The next morning, I woke up feeling normal. No lingering fear, no sense of dread, just the usual annoyance of having to get up and go to work. I chalked the whole thing up to a half-dream and forgot about it. It wasn't until that evening that I noticed the second thing. My shoes were wrong. I keep them lined up neatly by the door, not because I'm obsessive, but because the entryway is narrow and cluttered shoes get in the way. When I came home that night, one pair was slightly turned, angled toward the hallway instead of the door. It was subtle, enough that most people wouldn't notice. But I did. I stood there longer than I needed to, staring at them, feeling that same quiet discomfort creep back in. Again, I tried to explain it away. Maybe I'd rushed out that morning. Maybe I'd kicked them accidentally when I came in. I adjusted them and went on with my night. Over the next few days, little things like that kept happening, small changes, easy to dismiss on their own. The bathroom door left open when I always close it. A kitchen cabinet not fully shut. My phone charger unplugged from the wall, even though I was sure I'd left it charging overnight. Every time, I told myself the same thing. You're tired, you're distracted, you're overthinking. What really bothered me wasn't any single detail. It was the pattern. Everything felt like it had been used, not rummaged through, not stolen, just interacted with. As if someone had moved through my apartment with familiarity, careful not to leave anything obviously wrong. One night before going to bed, I decided to be more deliberate. I walked through the apartment slowly, checking everything. Cabinets closed, lights off, doors shut. I even took a second to look at the front door lock before turning away. Then I went into my bedroom, closed the door and locked it. That was new for me. I don't usually lock the bedroom door. It always felt unnecessary inside my own apartment. But that night, it made me feel better, more in control. I got into bed and lay there listening. Nothing happened, no sounds, no movement, no light under the door. At some point, I fell asleep. When I woke up, the first thing I saw was the same thin strip of light across the ceiling. My stomach dropped instantly. This time, I didn't move at all. I stared at the door, my mind racing, already knowing what I was about to see. Slowly, carefully, I sat up in bed. The bedroom door was open. Not wide open, just enough. And the lock was still turned. I didn't touch it. I didn't get up right away. I just sat there, staring at the door, trying to understand how that was possible without jumping to conclusions I didn't want to make. I kept telling myself the same thing, over and over. There has to be an explanation. But sitting there in the quiet, looking at a locked door that was no longer closed, I couldn't shake the feeling that something about my routine, something I thought I controlled, no longer mattered. And that realization stayed with me long after the light went off again. After that morning, I didn't leave the apartment right away. I sat on the edge of my bed, staring at the door, replaying the image in my head. The lock had still been turned. I was sure of it. I reached out slowly and tested it. It moved freely, like it always did. No resistance, no damage. I opened the door fully and stepped into the hallway. The light was on again. The front door was closed, locked, exactly the way I'd left it the night before. Nothing looked broken. Nothing looked forced. The apartment felt normal in that unsettling way that makes you question your own reaction. I checked the time. Just after 6 a.m., I went through the same routine as before, but slower this time. I checked the windows. Locked. The bathroom. Empty. The kitchen. Nothing out of place, except for one thing. The chair at the table had been pulled out slightly. That was new. I stood there longer than I should have, trying to decide whether it had been like that before. I honestly couldn't remember. That bothered me more than the chair itself. The fact that I couldn't trust my own memory anymore made everything feel unstable. I went to work that day, distracted and tired. I caught myself replaying the door in my head over and over, like if I thought about it enough, the answer would eventually present itself. I told no one. It felt stupid to say out loud. How do you explain something like that without sounding paranoid? That night, I bought a cheap door stopper from a hardware store on my way home. The kind that wedges under the door from the inside. It wasn't expensive, and I didn't need to justify it to anyone. I told myself it was just for peace of mind. Before going to bed, I repeated the same deliberate routine. Every light off, every door closed. I placed the stopper under my bedroom door, pressed it in firmly, and tested it by pulling. The door didn't budge. That should have been enough. I lay in bed with my eyes open longer than usual, listening to the familiar sounds of the building settling. Nothing stood out. Eventually, sleep took over. I woke up to darkness. No light this time. No strip across the ceiling. For a brief moment, I felt relief. Then I noticed something else. The door stopper was no longer under the door. It was on its side, a few feet away, near my dresser. My first reaction wasn't fear. It was confusion so strong, it made my head feel light. I sat up slowly, scanning the room, half expecting to see someone standing there. The room was empty. The bedroom door was open wider than before, not all the way. but wide enough that I could see down the hallway, straight to the front door. The hallway light was off. That was somehow worse. I got out of bed and picked up the stopper. It felt normal. No scratches, no cracks. I tried to imagine how it could have moved on its own. Maybe I'd kicked it in my sleep. That explanation sounded thin even to me, but I held on to it anyway. I checked the front door again. Still locked. At that point, I knew I couldn't keep pretending everything was fine. Something was happening, whether I understood it or not. The worst part wasn't the idea that someone might be coming into my apartment. It was the possibility that they were doing it without leaving a trace. I started changing my habits. I stopped staying up late. I stopped leaving things out. I began taking pictures of my apartment before going to bed. Not every night, but often enough that I felt like I had some record of how things were supposed to be. For a while, nothing happened. Days passed without incident. Then a week. The photos matched what I remembered. Doors stayed closed. Lights stayed off. I started to relax again, telling myself that stress had been the real problem all along. Then one night, I noticed something I couldn't ignore. I was scrolling through my phone before bed, comparing that night's photos to the ones from the night before. Everything looked the same, until I zoomed in on the hallway. The front door lock was turned the opposite direction. I sat up immediately and looked down the hallway with my own eyes. The lock was in the position it should have been. Locked. The photo showed it unlocked. I checked the timestamp. The photo had been taken at 11:42 p.m. I hadn't left the apartment after that. I hadn't touched the door. I went cold all over. I stayed up the rest of the night, sitting in my bedroom with the door closed, the light on, and my phone in my hand. Nothing happened. No sounds. No movement. Morning came quietly, like it always did. That was when I decided to install a small camera. It wasn't anything fancy, just a basic indoor camera meant for pets. I set it up in the corner of the living room, angled toward the hallway and front door. I told myself I was being rational. If nothing was happening, the camera would prove it. That night I slept with the bedroom door locked and the stopper back in place. I woke up to my alarm, heart already racing. The door was closed. The stopper was still under it. For the first time in days, nothing was wrong. I almost laughed. At work, I checked the camera footage. Most of the night showed exactly what I expected. Empty rooms, still shadows, nothing out of place. I skipped through the timeline until around 3 a.m. When something changed. The camera didn't show anyone entering. It showed the hallway light turning on. There was no visible movement, no hand reaching for the switch. The light simply came on, steady and quiet, illuminating the hallway. I leaned closer to the screen, my pulse pounding. A minute later, the bedroom door began to open. Slowly. Just enough. From the camera's angle, I couldn't see inside the room. I couldn't see what caused the door to move. I just watched as the gap widened, stopped, then stayed there. The door never opened fully. After that, nothing else happened. The light stayed on until morning. I watched the clip over and over, looking for something I'd missed. A shadow, a reflection, anything that could explain it. There was nothing. I didn't sleep in my apartment that night. I stayed at a friend's place across town, telling him I needed a change of scenery. I didn't bring the camera with me. I didn't want to see what it might record while I was gone. The next morning I went back. Everything looked normal when I opened the door. Too normal. No lights on, no doors open. The apartment felt untouched, like it had been waiting. I packed a bag that afternoon. I didn't move out immediately. I couldn't afford to, but I stopped sleeping there. I only came by during the day, and only for short periods. I avoided the hallway whenever I could. Eventually, I broke my lease and left. I've lived in 2 different places since then. I still lock my door every night. I still check it twice. Sometimes I wake up in the dark and stare at it, waiting to see a strip of light appear where it shouldn't. It hasn't happened again. But every now and then I catch myself wondering something I don't like thinking about. If locking the door never mattered, what exactly was it meant to stop?